Development doesn't stop when we reach adulthood. Rather, it continues through the life course. In this video, we'll continue exploring development through late adulthood. The current life expectancy in the US is around 75 years for men and around 80 years for women. In other words, it's very likely that many of us will go on to live for several more decades. What will happen to us as we age, especially as we transition into late adulthood? A common stereotype of older individuals is that of memory and cognitive decline. However, although on the one hand it is true that older individuals do experience cognitive decline in some areas, on the other hand they may also experience cognitive gains in other respects. For example, we often view older adults as sources of wisdom and turn to them for general life advice. To describe these two different types of cognitive developments, psychologists often make a distinction between what are called fluid versus crystallized intelligence. Fluid intelligence involves basic reasoning and problem-solving abilities. It's required for tasks like using creativity or logic to navigate new situations and solve novel problems. Fluid intelligence tends to peak around middle age and then steadily begins to decline. In part, this appears to be due to the declining ability of our working memory. Remember, our working memory is the information that we're currently working with or thinking about. Our working memory capacity is limited. That is, we can only process so much information at once, and the more complex the information, the more of our working memory space it takes up. As our working memory ability declines, so too does our ability to complete tasks that require us to think abstractly about complex problems. However, although fluid intelligence tends to decline over time, crystallized intelligence continues to grow with age. Crystallized intelligence is the ability to draw on past life experience and learned procedures. This might include things like applying learned rules to a familiar situation, having a large vocabulary, recalling historical facts, and utilizing accumulated knowledge in a specific field. Although all individuals eventually experience some amount of cognitive decline as they age, some people go on to develop dementia. Dementia is not a single disease. Rather, it's a general term encompassing a range of symptoms, such as problems with memory, language, and problem solving. To qualify as dementia, these problems need to be severe enough that they are interfering with the person's daily life. Alzheimer's disease is the most common type of dementia, accounting for roughly 60 to 70% of all dementia cases. Perhaps the most well-known symptom of Alzheimer's disease is memory loss. However, Alzheimer's is accompanied by other symptoms as well, such as changes in mood and behavior. For example, people with Alzheimer's may experience increased agitation, depression, or mood swings. The exact cause of Alzheimer's is not known. However, abnormalities have been observed in the brain structures of people with Alzheimer's. Specifically, people with Alzheimer's have a buildup of what are called plaques, which are beta-amyloid protein fragments that build up in the spaces between nerve cells, and tangles, which are twisted fibers of another protein called tau that are inside the nerve cells. It's believed that these plaques and tangles inhibit the ability of the nerve cells to function properly, thus leading to cognitive declines. Although most people develop some plaques and tangles as they age, those with Alzheimer's tend to develop far more and in a predictable pattern, beginning in areas important for memory before spreading to other regions. There is currently no cure for Alzheimer's, although there are some recent promising medications that appear to help with managing symptoms and slowing the progression of the disease. The second most common type of dementia is vascular dementia, which accounts for about 20% of all dementia cases. Vascular dementia is caused by impaired blood flow to the brain, which can lead to either major or mini strokes. Having diabetes, high cholesterol, or poor health behaviors such as smoking can increase one's chance of developing vascular dementia. Although there exist negative stereotypes about aging in our culture, it's also true that many people continue to live happy, full, and healthy lives well into their 80s, 90s, and beyond. For example, this is a picture of Jan Holmquist, who at 80 years old ran a 5K with her granddaughter, and along the way, she set a new 5K time record for her age group of 24:08. That's about 10 minutes faster than I was able to run when I jogged in a 5K this summer. What factors can promote a healthy aging experience? Certainly, making healthy lifestyle decisions, such as eating well and exercising regularly, are important. And although it might still seem like a long way off, there's evidence that the kinds of lifestyle behaviors that we engage in now can have long-term impacts later in our life. For example, greater cognitive gain in your 20s is moderately positively correlated with cognitive health from ages 70 to 82. Research also shows that having well-established social networks are especially important for physical and mental health at all stages of life. For example, here are the results from a famous meta-analysis by Holt Lundstedt and colleagues. These researchers looked at lots of studies that follow people over time to see who lived and who died. They then correlated potential risk factors, such as history of smoking, heart disease, air pollution, etc., to see what most strongly predicted mortality from any cause. The result? Across all of these studies, one of the most important factors that predicted all-cause mortality was people's level of social integration. In other words, people with high levels of social connection were significantly less likely to die for any reason. Other research has identified so-called blue zones, or areas of the world where people appeared to have especially long lifespans, greater than what would be expected based on chance alone. The list of blue zones includes Sardinia, Italy, Okinawa, Japan, Nicoya, Costa Rica, and Ikaria in Greece. Author Dan Buettner has popularized the concept of blue zones and has proposed adding a fifth zone in Loma Linda, California. According to Buettner, these regions share some common characteristics that might promote longevity, such as regular physical activity, a primarily plant-based diet, social connection, and a sense of purpose. However, the idea of blue zones has also been critiqued on several grounds, and some research has failed to verify results showing increased longevity in these areas. For example, there's some concern about the accuracy of birth and death records in these regions, especially in Okinawa, Japan, where many records did not survive in the aftermath of World War II. In this video, we cover development into older adulthood. For the exam, you should be able to define and distinguish between fluid versus crystallized intelligence, define dementia and distinguish between the two major types of dementia, Alzheimer's and vascular dementia, and explain what factors might promote healthy aging.